But Donald Trump has used this as a galvanizing message, and he triumphed in South Carolina, of all places.
Yeah.
Popular to Bush, saying popular. I know you were backing Jeb Bush. He's out of the race now. Could you accept Donald Trump as the Republican nominee?
Look, I'll accept anybody who carries Florida and Ohio. I believe in the American Constitution.
So you would accept the Republican nominee?
Well, I would
over,
accept,
let's say, Hillary Clinton.
I would accept anyone who wins the election. Whoever controls the Electoral College deserves my loyalty and respect as president. Now, let me
I don't mean to be disrespectful, sir, but I guess knowing that Bill Clinton appointed you, which I forgot, to be honest, do you have any loyalty or preference to his wife?
This is about going forward, and I will cast my vote based upon whom I think is best for the United States. And now you put some chum in the water, so let me come to the bait here, all right? If Mr. Trump intends to govern consistent with some of the things he said during the campaign, I would be quite uncomfortable.
Really?
Yes.
So when he has talked about building a wall and the things he said about Muslims, I know you have not taken very kindly to that. But maybe that's all hyperbole on the campaign.
Maybe. All right. And we will see. But if it's
what about keeping Muslims out or going slow on that?
Let me repeat that for you in another way. All right. We as a nation are going to keep the adherents of one of the world's great monotheisms out of our country until we think about it for a while, which I think is not an unfair description of the plan of action. I mean, that beggars the imagination as to what that even means.
So you think that it would cause more harm than good, even though all the prominent terror attacks have been speared by extreme Muslims?
Neil, it would cause more harm than good, and hear me out, because this is really important, all right? More of those attacks have happened in Europe than they have in the United States. Part of that's distance, part of that's geography. Part of that is the character of the societies in which we live. We are a welcoming society. We assimilate very well. The average Islamic income in this country is above the national average. None of that is true in those European countries. Why would you put that war-winning cultural reality at risk by saying these kinds of things? That actually makes Americans less safe.
That's interesting. Would Marco Rubio and his comments on this and other subjects, since so many Bush loyalists have moved to him as sort of like the backup acceptable figure, entice you?
I've advised Governor Bush. I have not made any decision on advising anyone else.
Okay. On how dangerous things are now versus post 9/11, you have an interesting vantage point from the NSA, CIA, more or less vulnerable to attacks now versus then.
And we're talking about terrorism, right?
Yes.
All right. So here's how, let me paint a graph in the ether between us, okay? Neil? So this is September 10th, 2001. That's our starting point, all right? And we were in great danger, maybe even greater danger than we anticipated in those briefings to the president. Over the next 10 years, because of the actions of two presidents, not just President Bush, but President Obama, we have made ourselves a great deal safer. And if you and I were having this conversation in 2011, I'd be feeling good about life and probably slapping a happy face on my graph. But, Neil, since about 2011, that line started to go back up. All right? We've run into Jihad 2.0 in the face of ISIS. So that line now has come back up on that graph. It's still not, in my view, back where it was here. But we are less safe. We are more safe than we were here. We are less safe than we were 4 or 5 years ago.
But, General, is that because of the rise of ISIS, or the rise of all of these guys, or the rise of these, lone wolf attacks? All of the above?
It's across the board.
Because when I talked to Senator John McCain, and he was sitting where you are, sir, he was saying, well, what we've done is default on our leadership role in the Middle East, and now there's hell to pay.
I would strongly agree that that line nosed over at about the same time, and in fact, in part because of the American decision to go to the residual force in Iraq represented by a round number, 0.
So a huge mistake in your eyes.
Oh, yeah. I actually think it actually threw away a victory that we had within our grasp that would require continued American energy to sustain. Now, look, I am not saying those 15,000 residual Americans were going to defeat ISIS. What I'm saying is the 15,000 residual Americans were the glue that kept Iraqi society from turning against itself. With the Americans there, the three factions could at least agree on one thing. The other two weren't going to eat them. When the Americans left, everybody went to their corner and lived out their worst expectations.
Amazing. All right, General Michael Hayden, former director of the NSA, the CIA, playing on the edge. It makes you think. It's very impressive. The only thing wrong about him is this affinity for the Steelers. It's a whole nother, it's a long day. I don't have time for this. We'll have more after this.